All right, so you're coming to PC. Well, congratulations. You are now about to step in kind of a different world. Same game, but different.
Same, but different. But still same. Thank you. Konnichiwa.
Now, these are my 7 things I wish I would have known before going into Destiny 2 on PC. First up, it's gonna take you a minute to get used to the field of view and 60 frames per second. Like, it kinda, I don't know, made me nauseous at first. Like, going from 30 FPS on console, as well as like, I don't know, 70 something default field of view, and then jumping straight into like 144 FPS with 105 field of view. Holy hell. And I know I've got some veteran PC players on here right now. It's like, yo, man, come on. Who gets nauseous over that? Some people do. If you get used to looking at 30 frames per second for many, many years, and then suddenly you jump, as well as the field of view jump, it's a little bug-eyed, and it takes a second to get used to that. So give yourself a moment, acclimate. If you do find yourself getting nauseous, step away for a moment, come back, and before you know it, you'll be used to it. Second tip. Play some PvE, especially for my guys that are going from controller to mouse and keyboard for the first time. Take a moment, finish out some weekly, some daily challenges, and just concentrate on getting used to this new input system. Now, if you happen to be rocking controller still, obviously apples to apples, this transfer is not going to be an issue for you. You're just going to have to get used to the frame rate as well as the field of view. But if you are going to mouse and keyboard for the first time, I highly advise using PvE as training grounds, because you're going to become very disheartened if you jump straight into Crucible and your aim is just going all over the place. This is a natural reaction, but use low-level PvE activities as a source for just getting used to this new input system, which takes us to tip number 3. Let's talk DPI, sensitivity, as well as a host of other things. After you've been inside of PvE for a second with the default settings, now I want you to start looking at what is the best sensitivity for you. Now, me, when I first transferred to PC, oh yeah, I changed it up so many times. I've actually reached out to Cammy Cakes before, asked him what his loadout was, as well as his sensitivity and DPI. I reached out to my clanmates, I know Gamer specifically, Dimitri, Les. What I've come to find out is everyone has very different settings when it comes to something like DPI and sensitivity. What you choose is not something that needs to remain in stone, because originally I reached out to Cammy. He told me he rocks like a 1.0 ADS modifier for sensitivity at 800 DPI. Man, I really tried to play this setting, because look at Cammy. He's a fantastic player, but obviously he and I have very different range of motion, because I felt like 800 DPI at that setting was just messing me up. It was too slow. And I've got a very big mouse pad, so it's not like I don't have enough room here to move. But in terms of just my movement, 800 DPI felt really slow. But essentially all I did was up it to 1000 at force sensitivity, and I slapped on a 0.9 modifier just so that when I aim down sights, the sensitivity just dials back just a little less, and that has felt comfortable to me. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, it took probably 4 or 5 months to arrive at settings that I actually felt comfortable at. So if you don't get it right the first time, or the second time, or the 10th time, my advice is to give a couple days to a specific DPI and sensitivity together, and then make micro adjustments depending on what feels good to you. So if 800 DPI feels way too fast, then dial that down a little bit. If you feel like the DPI feels pretty good, but the in-game sensitivity overall feels too fast, then just dial back the sensitivity in-game. And again, this is just gonna come down to personal preference and you. To be honest with you, coming up with the right personal settings is kind of a nightmare. But once you adjust to something that feels comfortable to you, you'll pretty much get an understanding of what looks right, and that'll transfer from game to game. Speaking of other games, this brings me to my next tip. I was having a tough time adjusting to mouse and keyboard to PC. I just felt like I wasn't getting it. My aim was just not where I wanted it to be. I actually took a break from Destiny for like a week, and I played Splitgate. Now, I'm not saying Splitgate is the game of all games to go out and train your aim with, but it worked well for me. During that week to weekend, I spent time playing nothing but Splitgate. I was doing a review on it, and when I went back to Destiny, my aim felt so good. Now, obviously, my aim now has improved greatly since then, because my aim was still pretty bad back then, but stepping away from the stress of Destiny, diving into a game that you really don't have have any knowledge of, and just concentrating on learning how to aim really helped. You see, the most frustrating thing about Destiny, especially if you're used to playing with the previous input, like a controller, you know what you're supposed to do in your head. You see it. You see the ways to outplay enemies, but your fingers are not doing what they're supposed to be doing because they just don't have the muscle memory down yet. So actually picking up another game that you have no previous history with was super beneficial in allowing me to just grow and understand the basic fundamentals to just aiming. And again, for me, I just felt like it took a lot of stress off of me as I didn't have any type of expectations for myself game after game in this new game. All right, next tip, and I know I'm not really getting into this in a lot of depth. These are just like, hot takes, man. So I hope you're okay with it. But let's talk about some hardware. I have made hardware purchases so many times. I mean, I have gone through like 3 or 4 different keyboards. I'm on my 3rd mouse. Yes, there's been a lot of purchases I have made, and it probably won't be the last one. Currently, right now, I am using the Ducky keyboard. I think it's the version 2 of it. And I'm also using the glorious Model O mouse. Now, previously, I had the G502. This was also a very good mouse, but I felt like it was too heavy. I then dropped to the Logitech Pro Wireless, which I felt was really good, but eventually I arrived at glorious Model O. And I don't even know if the Model O here is going to be my final mouse. These are actually very important purchases that will make all the difference for you in any game that you play. When it comes to first-person shooters, I like a light mouse. And the Model O has like a comparable weight to the final mouse Air 58, but it costs, or at least it cost me $50 versus like almost $300 for the final mouse. I would say not to spend that kind of money on any mouse. So the hardware decision on this one is not me necessarily telling you to buy a specific mouse. I'm not affiliated with any of these guys. My suggestion is don't go overboard and spend $100 to $200 on a mouse. I know I bought the Logitech Pro Wireless. I think at the time that was like $140. It was a very expensive mouse. It is a good mouse, and price-wise, you would think being a more expensive mouse, it would be way better than the glorious Model O. But the Model O is what I arrived at as being the mouse that I'm sticking to for the time being. My biggest recommendation is to check out this guy right here. He reviews keyboards and a ton of different gaming mice. I would say any of his top 10 are great contenders for you. And really what it's going to come down to is grip, hand size, and like personal preferences when it comes to wireless versus wired. I watched a lot of his reviews, but the only thing I didn't take his advice on is buying the Air 58 final mouse. I believe at the time of his review, the mouse was maybe $50, but it's since been jacked up a ton. But I would still highly recommend checking out all of his reviews, as he'll give you some understanding of which hardware you should choose. My only advice when it comes to hardware, don't go out and purchase the most expensive thing. Trust me, the difference between a $50 mouse and a $300 mouse, especially nowadays, there is no difference. It's just people intentionally driving the price up. So don't fall for that, and don't overspend here. Now, next tip for PC, because we have really gotten off way in left field. Now we're going to talk about gameplay, specifically in Crucible, and really just overall on PC. Number one, pacing is a lot different than what it was on console. You see, on console, the pace is a little bit slower. That's because everybody's on controllers. There is some input delay, and being 30 frames per second, amongst other constraints, the pace on console is obviously slower. On PC though, yes, it's much faster. And with it being faster, there are things that are going to be a tad bit more difficult. One of the first things that I noticed was flanking was more difficult on PC. Sure, you can catch a couple of potatoes, go around the corner and still flank them, but for the most part, you're going to need to be a lot more creative when it comes to flanking on PC. And that's just because on PC, people are just a little more aware. Maybe the radar jumps out to them more. Maybe they're just expecting it. I don't know. All I know is that flanking in general on PC is a lot more difficult than it is on console. I used to love going around the corner and catching a whole team not looking at me and just being like, oh yeah, I'm about to go in on you boys. On PC though, you go around a corner, you just get met with a Jotun out of like nowhere. Just some hoppity hunter sitting there waiting on you. He saw you like a mile away. And that's really due to the pace of the game. It's just sped up more on PC. People are a lot more aware and they react a lot quicker. Which takes us to our next tip. Aiming. You see, on console, I got very much used to aiming with my crosshairs in the general direction of an enemy. I got used to drag scoping in a way that normally would have resulted in me missing the shot, but I didn't miss it because I had aim assist. If you're playing mouse and keyboard, you will not have those benefits. You will miss shots that visibly you know that you would have made had you had the benefits of aim assist. Now, aim assist isn't some godsend that just turns everybody into some godly player. The reality is, initially, yes, aim assist benefits you and will benefit most players. But if you're actually trying to get out there and reach the highest level of skill, there is a point where mouse and keyboard will surpass controller. Now, it won't happen this week, and it probably won't even happen a few months from now. But eventually, you will start to see your skill sets outgrow your old skill sets with controller. I played controller for years, boys. I've had one in my hand since I was a little boy playing Halo way back when. Almost felt wrong to pick up mouse and keyboard, and everything in my being rejected it for months. But eventually, I started to see my own skills surpass that of what I previously possessed, which takes us to our final tip, guys. Be patient with yourself. Really, you're gonna get frustrated. You're gonna know certain days that a controller in your hands would absolutely destroy the new you with mouse and keyboard. But I'm here to tell you, if you remain patient with yourself, at some point you're gonna see the light, and at some point you're gonna recognize that you are surpassing what you were capable of doing before. But being patient with yourself is gonna have to become a reoccurring thing for you. There's some days, man, I land shots, I'm like, oh God, I am spicy, baby. I'm feeling good. And then the next day, it's like, where did it go? I can't hit a damn thing. And it happens. Sometimes you're on point, sometimes you're not. Be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to grow. Play a few other games, and you'll eventually start to see the new you surpass your old capabilities. Now, for my guys that are transferring from console and you're gonna be using a controller, pretty much scrap everything I just said. Other than pacing, it's gonna change for you, but you're pretty much ready to go. At some point, you will be faced with a dilemma though. You will start to see some players beating you in duels that you feel like you should have won. And it is a possibility you might have won had you had a different input. Again, when it comes to skill ceiling, mouse and keyboard has a much higher one than controller does. I'm not saying it's superior, but it has some obvious advantages that may not be apparent to you at first, but eventually you will come face to face to it. So guys, those are my tips for my players transferring to PC. This transfer, I think, begins tomorrow. I know PC players today are going to Steam, or at least we're getting everything set up to migrate to Steam. Don't believe we moved to Steam until October 1st, but August the 21st is supposed to be when cross save begins. I'm actually going to be bringing my PC account over, grinding it up. Got too many things on that account, and I'm super happy to be getting it back. For my fellas and ladies that are a little wary about transferring to this new platform and you want to grow with some players, feel free to come by our Discord. We've got an open Discord with a lot of players that play really on all platforms. But if you want to grow as a group instead of just throwing yourself in as a solo player, come by, man. Check out some LFGs on our Discord, make some friends. We've got a lot of great people here who are all just trying to have a good time. And that's the whole reason why we're playing games, guys, just to have a good time. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.